think ambulance chasing is a term of fact, it's a term of art, but I don't want to do that. So I am asking you to be on your very shrewdest, smartest point on this so that we are appropriate in every way. Thank you.
Councilmember Green.
Thank you. Let me just say that for all of us sitting around the table, we have a fiduciary obligation to the citizens of the city of Houston, not to any corporation, not to any outside entity, but to our citizens. We are experiencing a deficit in our health care budget. We have we've talked about doing away with pensions of our employees because we don't have the dollars to fund this. And so a reputable firm steps up to the place who I've actually had conversations with. I'm not sure if any of you have had an opportunity to speak with a law firm, but I actually have spoken with Ms. Fox, and I had the same concerns, Councilwoman Noriega, as you had. Whether or not, one, this was a cause of action that the city of Houston could recover, and two, that we were not just out ambulance chasing. And after speaking with Ms. Fox, specifically going through the numbers of which our finance department put together with regard to potential recovery, which, by the way, is over $20 million of lost sales tax revenue to our city. I think for us not to go after this, I think we are in violation of our fiduciary responsibility to the city of Houston.
Would you jump in?
Sure, yes.
I appreciate that explanation, and I'm going to defer to my colleagues that are attorneys because I don't know what else to do. And so that you make a very valid point, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And, to go out, I know especially to my residents in my area and say, well, there's recovery and the city of Galveston recovers and the city of Beaumont recovers and all cities surrounding us recover. And because we fail to act, we don't recover. During this particular budget crisis that we are now in, I think we do no service to the citizens of Houston. Now, I get it. No one likes to go after major corporations, especially when they're housed here. But we have to do it with Reliant. We have to do it with AT&T. It's not pretty. We don't like it. They're all employers of the city of Houston. But if there's an opportunity for us to recover damages on behalf of our citizens, I don't think we have a choice. Thank you.
Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I hope that everyone has a copy of the agenda item 13 that you have in front of you. Tells you something about BP and what has happened, $34 billion in damages for lost tax revenues. Let me just say this, that I understand exactly how my colleagues feel, all you all feel. This is something unpleasant, but when you have loss of life, that's unpleasant. When you have layoffs, that's unpleasant. When you have a number of productions, we are the 4th largest city in the nation, the oil capital of the United States of America. We are. Think about it. If Beaumont can file, if Galveston can file and receive funds, then what happened to Houston? Are we exempt from this? We produce oil tubes. We produce oil here. But at the same time, if you say we haven't lost anything in sales tax, let's go look back at 2010 and see how much money we lost at that point in time. No one is ambulance chasing here. This is not an ambulance chase. This is about $34 billion that's been set aside for revenues that you lost, you can recoup, and that we can take those revenues and help our city that is strapped for cash. I get really sick and tired of hearing about streets and things need to be repaired and we can't repair them. But at the same time, we back off from this, guess what? We hear the same old song, same old dance, next day, next day. I encourage you to look beyond the scope of this because we have a responsibility. If we lose money, if property taxes aren't paid, we go after the people, don't we? We have collection agencies going out to collect those property taxes, don't we? If we lose money, the city's not in business to lose money. The city's in business to take care of its responsibilities. So therefore, I encourage you to read this. Alabama got $114 million for it. Texas got $5 million already. We're the fourth largest. We haven't lost anything. You haven't looked at it. You haven't investigated. So no one's trying to go in here and try to make up something. We're not losing a penny. The city of Houston is not losing one dime. We're not exerting one dime on this. We're able to retrieve funds from this. Fine. That's good. To my colleagues, they say, well, the federal government did this. The federal government did not make this oil spill. Negligence did this. It was negligence. How long do they have to pay for it? How long is the person dead? It's a mark that's on them for the rest of their careers. We just hope it doesn't happen again. And I'd like you all to consider this very strongly, that if we are a city that needs help, and a city that's lost, then why can't we recoup some of what we've lost? That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Martin.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I don't disagree with Councilmember Green, but the way I make decisions are based on facts and data, not emotion. So here are the facts. When we asked and we received information on Monday, the response we had was a loss of sales tax revenue from the local businesses adversely affected. Those businesses have within their property policy insurance something called business interruption that they can go against and receive compensation. My question that deals with facts and data is how does our property that we just passed about 2 or 3 weeks ago deal with business interruption? Because if we have business interruption, if we lose sales tax due to an adverse condition, we should be able to hit a business interruption policy for compensation. The second part, in 2010 and 2011, I was a finance chair for the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. We monitored hot taxes on a monthly basis. And if I remember right, the hot taxes at the end of 2010 and into 2011 showed a significant increase. So that's my recollection. I don't have the data. I don't have the facts. Before we enter any lawsuit, which is going to be, for whatever reason we enter into it, everybody's got personal opinions. I want to see the facts. I want to see the facts that say, how much in sales tax did we lose? Can we hit a business interruption policy? And B is, what exactly were the hotel and motel occupancy tax for the time period between the spill in April of 2010 until we felt that it was not adversely affected. So those are the data points that I want to receive that I haven't received, but yet we have to vote on this today because I'm told it's not taggable. So my question is to Counselor is, can we file a lawsuit with the intention to revisit this lawsuit and maybe pull out of that lawsuit at some point in time where council does not feel it's an appropriate measure, or are we stuck moving ahead? Because I do believe that we need to respect the fiduciary responsibility of what we're doing. And from what I understand, this is done on a contingency basis, which means we don't pay a penny until we receive compensation. So, number one, business interruption, I want to find out. Number two, what are the data points on the hotel and motel taxes? And number three is, can we file and come back later and pull out?
Do you want me to try to address all three of those issues? I think we could, frankly, as far as business interruption insurance is concerned, I must tell you that having represented governmental entities for as long as I have, I've never known of a governmental entity itself being able to acquire that kind of insurance for loss of tax revenue. But as far as sitting here today and being able to give you specific numbers in terms of the loss of revenue that was directly connected to the spill and moratorium, obviously I am unable to do that. It's going to be the subject of expert analysis and a detailed forensic examination. We know because we had to, under the Federal Pollution Act, the Oil Pollution Act, you have to file an administrative notice of claim at least 90 days before you file a lawsuit. So approximately 3 months ago, the legal department, the finance department, spent an entire weekend, recognizing that we had a deadline to try to come up with what the number would be for a claim. And as I believe Councilmember Green referenced, the number that was arrived at was $23 million. Now, does that mean we're going to be able to recover that? No, I'm not suggesting. It's a number that could be lower, could be higher. I have no idea. But that's the number that our finance department saw in terms of lost sales tax revenue based on their best estimate, working very hard that weekend to try to come up with a number. Then let me address the third issue, which I think is the most important issue. And I hope when Councilmember Christie was referring to lawyers who had nothing to do, he wasn't talking about me or the legal department. I take my ethical responsibilities as an attorney very seriously. Councilmember Noriega mentioned the need to represent this city with integrity. I would like to believe that I have always done that, and as for all of my clients. In this engagement letter, there is a termination for convenience clause. It was very important to me in negotiating this engagement that the City of Houston would be able to unilaterally terminate this relationship and this lawsuit at its discretion. And that responsibility lies with me if I were to believe that the pursuit of the claim was not ethically colorable. So at this point in time, I believe that these lawyers should be given the opportunity to establish the evidence. We have a limitations period that runs on April 20th, so there's clearly not enough time to do that before the filing lawsuit. But I assure you, Council Member, that I will look at this, watch this very carefully, and if I were to conclude based on the evidence that I saw, based on my experience as a trial lawyer, that it doesn't meet the mark, I would be the first one to raise my hand and say we need to pull the plug.
I'm in queue. Can I ask a follow-up?
We'll put you back in the queue. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. We're talking about our fiduciary responsibilities. And that definitely could be part of the argument here in the sense that we're not in a good situation as a city. But does that mean we need to continue to go out in the private sector for more and more? We're going after our citizens, we're going after now the business sector. We need to be responsible with our finances that we have been given as stewards of the tax dollars that we have right now. When we see the agenda items week after week, we have to be prioritizing and be wise with our city spending, not looking for more and more revenue to misspend at times. So this is what I propose. We're talking about putting people at the table, bringing the stakeholders to the table. I think it's unwise for our city to basically be allowing there to be a headline out there, City of Houston to sue BP. We are the energy capital of the world. Rather than talking about maybe $20 million and then 40% being given to the attorneys with the reimbursement of firm's actual expenses. Okay, so half the money we're going to get, $10 million. I think perhaps if we have the approach to sit across the table from BP and we need $10 million, okay, let's ask them for $10 million. And let's have a conversation with them rather than have this approach, okay, we're just going to go after because it's there. Because we're in a financial state.
I will yield.
Sure.
My understanding is that the city has tried that and that a demand letter has been sent and that those negotiation attempts have transpired.
And see, what I'm talking about is different than the demand letter. I'm talking about the city, us as leaders, actually having a cordial conversation across the table from corporate leaders, from businessmen. And we have Southwest Airlines and all these companies that go and donate private sector funds to help projects like the July 4th celebration. That's the way we can do positive business in the city, rather than this negative approach of assuming the energy company. The energy industry is what made us great. And if we have a responsibility to protect our citizens, our responsibility is to not go after that which makes us successful, that makes the citizens prosper. We need to have a smarter policy of approach to the business sector, to the private sector. And I cannot support something like this at this point, and I think we need to do a better effort at trying to reach out in not a demand letter, but actually having a cordial conversation with leaders in the energy industry. Thank you.
Attorney Coleman, it looks like you were trying to...
Yes, council member, it's important to understand that this process, that 90-day notice that I referred to, that's set forth under the statute, is established for the very purpose that you're referring to. And in fact, BP developed forms that they requested potential claimants to fill out so that they could consider the claims before a lawsuit was filed. We gave that notice over 90 days ago. My phone has not been ringing off the hook. I have not heard from BP at all.
And if I may respond, is that there's a difference between setting a demand letter and there's a difference between setting up a meeting with these corporate, individuals, and sitting across the table from them and saying, okay, we have a need for $10 million, do you mind considering that? You know, these are major corporations that have done a lot of good in the community that I think, you know, if we have a more friendly approach, that maybe we can get places farther than spending $10 million on legal fees. Thank you.
Chair, recognizes Vice Mayor Pro Tem Bradford.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's fair to say that the evidence has to be established, and whether there are a loss in hot tax or sales tax that can be connected as damages to the city of Houston's source of revenue, that is what needs to be done. I think clearly it has been indicated that there are damages at least on the sales tax side anyway, clearly, and whether the dots can be connected and liability established and Houston is entitled to recovery, that is what needs to be done. The evidence established. You know, in the RCA, it indicates at the bottom, no settlement or resolution of the dispute will be undertaken without the approval of the city attorney, end quote. I do not believe that City Attorney Feldman, Ms. Fox, or Mr. Jolly, or the other attorneys involved is going to bring reproach on their name, on their reputation, on a case that is completely without merit. Mr. Feldman has indicated that he is going to monitor this action at any point along the way, that he thinks that the city of Houston should pull out the lawsuit. There's a proviso in that allows them to do that. And I think as has been said in large part that the issue is damages based on the spill and connecting that to harm caused to the city of Houston. And to recover the damages, at this point, it doesn't cost the city of Houston anything because there's a contingency contract being proposed. And back to what Councilmember Green said about the fiduciary responsibility and a duty to act. Well, if in fact there are damages and those damages are connected to the city of Houston's loss of revenue, then I'm like Councilman Green and others have said, I think we have a fiduciary duty to try to collect on behalf of the city of Houston to the extent it's demonstrated in a court of law that the damage has in fact occurred and Houston has suffered a loss. But you simply can't do that by calling for a meeting. Unfortunately, the way this process works, attorneys do what they do. And, sometimes chiropractors, they look for things to do. That's not necessarily bad. It's just that we all pursue, what we're going to be trained in, and we go out and we provide our service to the industry. But a little different here. There are 2 million plus people here in this city that have allowed us to represent them when harm has been demonstrated. So I come down the side of we need to establish the evidence. And we can't establish the evidence unless we engage those with the expertise to establish the evidence. And if they're able to establish the evidence, and under the rule of law, they get a verdict in the favor of the city of Houston, I think we have an obligation to do that. Now, my question, Mr. Bellman, is the Oil Pollution Act is separate. Let's go this way. The fund that has been set up, we have not pursued an action under the fund necessarily. We can pursue damages or can pursue right under the Oil Pollution Act, which is not necessarily a cause of action drawn from the fund. Is that correct?
That is correct. Houston is not eligible to assert its claim under the fund. That's why it's necessary to bring an action directly under the Federal Oil Pollution Act.
Well, thank you. And that makes it no different than any other cause of action that's brought for damages, with the exception, it's just going to really take, in my view, as an attorney, a lot of money up front with expert personnel and economists, etc., to establish that these are damages, and these damages connect those dots to Houston's revenue source. And that's what Mr. Bellman is saying, that he and others will watch that real closely, Councilman Bennington, and just see if, in fact, those dots are connected. And if they're not, he reserves the right to pull out. So I would urge my colleagues to, allow Mr. Bellman, Ms. Fox, Mr. Jolly, and others to go forward and bring on the expertise and use their money, not the city of Houston money, to establish the evidence. Thank you, Caroline.
Councilmember Costello.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a couple of questions that have been said, particularly from the legal field, because that's not my field. But some of my questions are geared towards the cost of the city. And Mr. Bellman, you did say that we could terminate at convenience.
That's correct.
Okay, is there a financial responsibility if we terminate for the expenses of the attorneys?
No.
None whatsoever?
None.
Okay. However, in their due diligence and doing their research, would they not require our staff to support in giving them information that we are providing? Or are they going to do all the research without any input from our staff?
I think at this point in time, we have furnished as much information as we as a city can furnish. Whether they might ask our staff to do some additional analysis, I don't know. I think it's what they're going to have to do. And I've had long conversations with Director Dow about this. What they have to do is immediately engage experts to look at the data and to really look behind the data that the city has.
Okay, as a follow-up question, a couple of my colleagues have referred to the fact that there have been communities here in Texas that have been successful in engaged on damage reimbursement. However, not to my knowledge under this particular act, is that correct?
That's correct. The city of Beaumont did retain counsel to assert a claim under the fund that I referred to earlier. But to my knowledge, that claim has not been asserted or resolved. I'm unaware of what the city of Galveston has done. No entity, to our knowledge, has yet to bring a direct action under the Oil Pollution Act.
Okay. just as a philosophical issue, this is not addressed to you, it's addressed to the community at large. You know, it's interesting to hear how the proliferation of lawsuits in the United States has occurred, in some cases frivolous lawsuits. And yet, even though there's no expense to the community who's filing, there's always an expense to the defendant, and whether or not a suit has any merit. It'd be interesting to see in the community if we can actually go back to if the loser loses, they pay all expenses. And then you have a little different situation in this particular scenario. That's just my own personal view. And I just want to relay that message. But following along on Councilmember Green's position relative to our fiduciary responsibility, I totally agree with you in your position. That being said, Mayor Pro Tem, is there a possibility that we can defer this item until we have an opportunity to have directed to outcome here and give us the information that you, Mr. Thomas, you referred to, that they have done an analysis? I'd like to see that. I haven't seen it. Is there a possibility to do that?
We could see if Director Dow is around. I don't know where he's at this moment. The item's not taggable.
Well, I understand. I'm talking about just deferring until the end of this meeting.
Yeah, we're going to work on it. We still have several council members in the queue, so we'll see what we can do. Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
My concern is to do what I think is morally, fiduciarily, if there's such a word, and legally, our responsibility as the city council. So how this plays across the country doesn't concern me. It's how it plays for the citizens of Houston who put us here. I don't think for a minute that the city is, saying to itself, we're financially strapped, let's look around and see who we can sue. That's not my perception of how this thing came around. If a wrong has been done, then I think we have the responsibility to follow up on it. I am not a lawyer, but I did grow up in a home where my father was, and his business was by contingency only. So I understand contingency, and I understand very clearly that lawyers won't take on cases unless they feel that they have a reasonably good shot at winning it, because they're putting out their money up front. And so I would have perhaps different thoughts if I thought the city was going to get handcuffed with a bill. But we're not. We're not. The lawyers are taking this on a contingency basis. If they don't have a preponderance of facts right now, they wouldn't even be here asking to move forward on it. So I feel very strongly about that. I don't consider this a frivolous suit, and I don't think the city is going after it because we may be cash strapped. I think we're doing what we think is responsible for the citizens of Houston. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Green.
Yes, Councilman. Should hear it, okay. I'd just like to ask Mr. Feldman again, as I understand it, he and his staff have done legal research, and you feel that on the facts of this case is actionable under the Oil Pollution Act, Mr. Feldman? Yes, sir. And I guess you've taken into consideration the difficulties of proof of the damages, like the extended moratorium and the fact that we're in a financial crisis at that particular time, which could have caused the diminution of revenues. I realize that's a matter of proof, but I guess it's been part of your analysis as well. I haven't seen any of the numbers. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, there's some intermediate things that might have caused the damages. One is the extended moratorium declared by the federal government on activities in the Gulf. And the second is the fact that we were in a general financial crisis in the United States during that period of time. And those are just two of the things that I think of. I'm sure there are a lot of other relevant kinds of things. And so I think that that's going to make the proof more difficult for the damages. So I just wondered if you had considered that before you had decided to refer this matter.
I had extensive discussions with the attorneys that the city would be engaging. I should point out that Ms. Fox and particularly Dennis Reich, Mr. Reich is a member of the plaintiff steering committee in the class action litigation against BP that established the fund for all of the private businesses and individuals that were affected by the spill. They believe, based on the evidence that they have seen so far, that this claim can be established. Mr. Reich and Ms. Fox are very good lawyers. They have the knowledge and the expertise in this area. I think it's appropriate for me to rely on their analysis initially in advising as to whether or not this is a cognizable claim. I would assure you that if at any point in time I thought it was not, then we would terminate this relationship. That's something I need to correct something that I said earlier, I believe in answer to a question from Councilmember Costello. If we terminate under the engagement letter, if we terminate for convenience, that is not for cause, then we would have a responsibility to reimburse expenses. If we terminate for cause, however, we do not. Based on my discussions with the lawyers, based on what I see on the face of the city's data, that there clearly was a significant drop in sales tax revenue during the relevant time frame, I believe that we can pursue this claim, at least initially, with knowledge that it is a cognizable claim and therefore not a frivolous claim. And I'm satisfied with that.
Well, did you look at the two issues in particular that I raised, the extensive federal moratorium, as well as the financial crisis that the country presented at the time?
I discussed that with the attorneys. Obviously, those are intervening or supervening events, and as Councilmember Bradford was saying, and it's all about being able to establish causal connection, and it's going to take extensive expert analysis to be able to distinguish those other factors from the spill and the resulting loss of business through the moratorium. That's what next week's going to have to do. Thank you.
Councilman Christie.
This is going to be fun. I'm going to agree with two fellow members and disagree with two of them. So, an engagement letter, and if you have foundation and merit for your case, that's a first punch, and it's hard to stop a fight once you slug somebody. And so I worry about the damage that's done with one fight. Mr. Green, and I respect the man, I like the man, I vote with him 90% of the time, but the pension problems and the medical care problems of this city is not BP's fault. So let's not look for money to solve problems that we have to solve ourselves. If you win this vote, I just solicit, like Mr. Pennington touched on, that if you sue BP, sue the federal government too for the overkill on the moratorium, because I think that costs more jobs and more tax revenues than anything that BP did. Mr. Burks, do not drag in emotional issues of deaths. That's separate and apart from loss of sales tax revenue. So if we go after it, it's not because of the loss of life. So do not drag that in there to support the case. Ms. Brown, I usually disagree with you 90% of the time. I like, it has to be tried. To sit down And I'm telling you, if I'm a BP president, and you're just saying, sponsor this for $10 million, send somebody like Ms. Cohen over there, somebody charming, and it makes sense. If I'm BP president, I'm going to say that $10 million sponsorship to the city of Houston saved me a lot more than a lawsuit that everybody loses. So think about that idea. I think that's an excellent idea to try it. Who says it won't work? Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Can I just say something about the fact that you referred to me as charming? It doesn't affect my vote.
Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been listening to everyone. I guess my question would be, I know about the fiduciary duty and our responsibility to go after something if there's reasonable cause for us for the lawsuit, but I guess my question now arises of a conflict that I'm hearing at the table. Councilmember Martin's question was to Attorney Feldman on whether or not we can pull out at any time if later we find out that this is something we don't need to do. And I think the response was yes, but then I just heard Attorney Feldman say that, well, yeah, we can pull out, but we have to pull out if we have justification to pull out. If we pull out just without cause, we owe penalty. But if we have cause, then we don't. So I guess there's a conflict to see exactly. I understand the fiduciary duty, but if we get into this, then if we find out, oh, well, we don't have reason to pull out, we find out we shouldn't have went this way, then we're having to pay a penalty on it. So where are we as a city protected, with this suit on moving forward? Are we protected in any way whatsoever? Because I'm hearing the conversations going back and forth, but I just heard a small conflict there based on the question that Councilmember Thank you.
Attorney Feldman, do you want to respond?
Please. Well, at first, Councilmember Christie suggested I don't have nothing to do, and now he suggests I'm not charming. Councilmember, I believe it's my responsibility, I know it's my responsibility to monitor this every step of the way. And to recognize that if the city were to terminate for convenience, that means without cause, that we would be responsible for the expenses that were incurred. And thusly, I have to look at this closely every step of the way before substantial expense is incurred in order to determine whether or not we need to pull out. So it's going to be my job to protect the interests of the city in this governing body in that connection.
I know that usually with lawsuits, you really can't put a timeline on it to say how long it possibly would take. But just in your mind and your thoughts and just from your experience dealing with something of this magnitude, we probably wouldn't know where we are if there were damages or if there's cost, maybe a couple of years down the line, a year, just from your experience, so we'd know at what point that we need to halt and rethink it later if there's something that we probably need to think about as a body, because I know the sole decision rests on you, but at what point in time will, we will be noted to say, we thought it was a good idea, but now we're figuring out that maybe, just from your experience, I know we can't put a timeline, but is there, any information that you know how long you think that we'll know what that answer may be?
I'm going to do two things, and the first will be to, along with these attorneys, to reach out to BP and to see how charming I can be to bring this to a quick close. The second thing I'm going to do is give these lawyers the charge to ascertain as quickly as possible whether or not we can make the causal connection necessary, and to talk directly to the experts myself in order to to make that determination. It's not going to be years, it'll be months.
Okay, I'm just, we have four lawyers at the table, I'm just curious to hear, to know what their comments are from a legal standpoint. Even though I know they can't consult on it, but, just to know what their feelings are on moving forward.
Councilmember Green.
5 lawyers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, let me just say to my good colleague, Councilmember Christie, I do appreciate your comments and I do appreciate your concern. But from a legal perspective, which I have to speak from, you really never want to waive the opportunity for recovery. And by hearing the comments from our city attorney with regard to the way he's moving forward with this matter, I think that we will put the city, if this passes, in a position whereby this is not some litigious claim offered by folks that don't have facts. As Councilmember Martin spoke of, in data, I think it just keeps us in the game, but it also keeps us true to our constituents. It keeps us true to our fiduciary obligation that we have to our citizens. This is not BP's, with regard to city's pension problems, it's not BP's fault. And I hope you didn't interpret me to say that our pension problem or our health care problem is BP's fault. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that there are actual damages that the city of Houston has incurred, and but for the spill that happened, we would not have incurred those damages. The question is causation. All that I'm asking my colleagues is to give us the opportunity to determine causation. If we cannot determine causation, then we don't move forward. If we're able to determine causation, then we're able to move forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Martin. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is going to be fun because the accountant's following the lawyer. Councilor Feldman, I hope not for 1 second do you think I was questioning your integrity or your ethics, because I hold them in the highest regard.
Only Christie was there.
Okay. But at the same time, this body has an ethical responsibility not to enter into a lawsuit without understanding all the facts. And now we're told by administration that we can't tag it, and we have basically an hour to make a decision on entering into a lawsuit, and I'm waiting for the response on the $23 million that we have. Because my recollection is, Macondo happened in April of 2010, and if you look back at the data in 2010, Q3 and Q4, we had a great number of people coming into this city that were hoping to get an opportunity to sue people and to work with BP, to work with Transocean, to work with Halliburton, because they had a major issue on their hands. So I remember the data from the hotel and motel tax supporting my dialogue, and that there was an increase in hotel-motel occupancy tax because of the number of people that were coming into the city to represent the 3, 4, or 5 companies that are headquartered here in the city. So I have an ethical responsibility to enter into a lawsuit that I think makes sense from a moral standpoint, an ethical standpoint, and an integrity standpoint, and I do not take that lightly. So when I look at Macondo that happened in April of 2010, and here we're talking about a lawsuit in April of 2013, 3 years later, and we don't have time to get information, I am adamantly opposed to having this type of a dialogue. We need the facts, we need the data. Entering into a lawsuit is something that I take very serious, especially with a company that is headquartered here, and in my opinion has taken a beating since their stock price has gone from $60 down to $40 where it is today. So they have taken enough of a beating. I understand we have a responsibility to respect the taxpayers. We're going to do that. But this body has an ethical responsibility to make decisions that are based on data and facts, and we do not have those points. Councilman Burke.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think that Councilmember Barton's point if I can speak directly to it, Attorney Feldman said that the finance department as well as legal department have done research on this, and they have seen a loss in revenues and sales tax. They have already seen that. That is a fact. Now, Councilmember Sullivan has asked for, Costello has asked for the director to come down from finance to give us some information. I believe it was you wanted. I'm sure they can produce those numbers for you. This is not an emotional situation. This is one of those things that we have an obligation as a city to look into these things and to be able to receive the funding that we deserve. I believe very strongly that Attorney Feldman will do a wonderful job, and has done a wonderful job in setting this up. He has given us contingencies where we can go in and out. We can either opt out at any point in time, or we can actually just change the whole demographics. We'll be supervising this. We owe this to the citizens of Houston, Texas, at least to look at it. If we don't set it up to be able to bring BP to the table, then when will we do that? And how will we look when we go back and we see an opportunity whereas other cities have received a whole lot of money and we received nothing, and at the same time we could have found out that we would have been eligible for it if we had not pursued. We're not spending one dime, not one dime that this city is spending. The attorneys are the ones who are doing that. This is what I say about people in collections. You know, collection agencies, we don't spend the money, they do. They go out and get the money, they get a percentage of it. That's what they're doing. So let us remember this, that it's no cost to the city, but it's also one of those things where as we've lost revenues and sales tax, we have a chance to get those back. We have a chance to do some greater good for the citizens of the city, and that is our responsibility, as Councilmember Green has stated. I know Councilmember this is an emotional issue, but you got to remember that this all started off with a tragedy. And so what we're saying now is that the funds are there and that we are pursuing it. We haven't said we're suing them yet, but we're putting the things together to do so. And if it's not there, we won't. Thank you.
Councilmember Long.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As an attorney, I believe that we also have a fiduciary duty to our constituents. I understand that BP has been beaten up pretty bad, and they have tried the best they could to compensate all the damages to the city, to all cities, to the whole region. But we, as a city, we also have the duty to our constituents. And now, the city attorney already said that there are damages. And if he sees that if there is no cause of action or there is no damages, we are going to withdraw the lawsuit immediately. We have only a short time to file this. And I think if we are not going to file it so that we are going to protect our rights for the citizens, we owe the citizens something. We need to protect their rights. So I support this not because we want to dig into BP's pockets. I don't think so. I don't think here the question of greed or the question of trying to beat down BP, I don't think that is necessary. I think the question here is do we owe a fiduciary duty to our constituents? And I say yes. Do we owe any fiduciary duty to BP in the sense we want them to succeed? But the fiduciary duty to our citizens is larger, is heavier. So we have to do what we have to do. I know we have a mix of emotional feeling and also logic here, but reasoning, I believe that we have to go and protect our constituents' rights. Thank you. So I'm going to support this issue.
Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gonzalez. Do you have any feedback on Director Dow? If not, I'd like to call a question, please.
Councilmember, we're still working on that. We do have, after you, we have one more councilmember that wishes to speak, and then I was going to see where we're at that point, and then since Councilmember Costello had made the request that
right, I mean, that's what I was going to speak with respect to Councilmember.
If you don't mind, we'll hear from the final councilmember, and then we'll move on to Councilmember Costello.
Yes, sir.
Vice Chair Pro Tem Bradford.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Davis, thank you kindly for your courtesy here. we simply, the request for the data, we may be able to produce data as to what the city projects as a loss, but we won't be able to produce data, showing the connection the dots, if you will. Yes, there's a loss, but is in fact BP responsible for that loss? We won't be able to do that. Not today. The evidence has to be developed, and to develop that evidence, we need to, in my view, it's going to take experts, economists, lawyers with expertise in this particular area, and others to develop the evidence that I'm hearing being sought after today. Let me yield and ask Mr. Feldman, for the record, please state again to those of us around the council table and the citizens that are watching this, why is this just not a rush thing today? Why is it that it's not tackable today? Why is it that we cannot delay? We take time to walk through that, all of us to understand why is it we must move on today, not tackle.
The Federal Oil Pollution Act of 1990 includes a 3-year statute of limitations. That statute of limitations runs on April the 20th, 2013. If council does not act today, then no lawsuit could be filed by the limitations cutoff. And that's why it would become moot. And that's why it's not tackable.
Thank you. And as has been said, I think that the duty that we have at this point